Over the last couple of years, I've built a villa in Bali, and now it has been on the market for a little over 1 year. So it's time to review that year. Was it a good investment? How are the profits and the returns? What was the revenue? What was the occupancy rate, daily rates, expenses, all these things. In this video, I look at the first year of operations, month by month. And in the end, of course, I summarize that year. Was it a good investment? What yield did I get on my investment? So let's jump right into it. After a long period of constructions with many delays and a lot of issues, rental started mid of October in 2022. So of course I started with an empty schedule with 0 bookings on day 1. I opened the door and hoped someone would come, basically. And actually that worked surprisingly well. So of course you start out with a lot of discounts and low rates because you just want spontaneous guests to come and try the villa out. You don't have any reviews yet. So you start out with low rates. But I did get 5 bookings already in the first month, and even though that was only half a month. I count the October as half a month. So I also cut the expenses by half. And at the end of the year, I will take the first half of October to round it up to a complete year. So I had 5 bookings and 14 days rented out in the first half month. So that's pretty good. There was no further maintenance after, of course, the first half of the month was purely maintenance and fixing the leaking pool. And I made a revenue of about roughly $3,750. And expenses just for the second half of the month of around $1,000, leaving me with an operating profit that was better than I expected for the very first time on the market. Now November, I also had 5 bookings. November was the first complete month on the market. 5 bookings, but only 13 days rented out. So it was a fairly bad month when it comes to rental. I had another 2 days blocking for maintenance, fixing of construction issues. I had a lot of construction issues that did drag into the first year of operations, from electricity that did not work or was not sufficient, leaks in the pool, a lot of small other things as well. The rates improved slightly, and nevertheless, the revenue was only slightly more than for the first half month. So a bit disappointing, and the operating profit for November was only $2,400. And I say operating profit because it does not take into account the depreciation or cost of capital of the investment. Now, when we look at the seasons in Bali, December is a bit of a mix. The first half of December is very much low season, but then the last third of the December is peak season. Around Christmas and New Year, that's the best time of the year. So I did get 8 bookings, 23 days rented out, and the rates improved a lot. Of course, around Christmas and New Year, you have the best rates of the year. And the revenue was around $10,000. Operating expenses here very high, but that is mostly also because insurance for the property was paid in that month. So that is a lot higher than normal. And of course, a couple other things. When it's rented out a lot, you have more electricity cost, small expenses like that. So the operating profit still a lot better than before, $4,850 roughly. And January also a good month, similar like December. The beginning of January is still considered peak season, and then it goes back into the normal wet season drag. So 8 bookings, 25 days rented out. I had 1 more day closed for maintenance. That was just a minor cleaning thing of the couch. And the rates went down a little bit, but still pretty good. So $10,000 revenue, and the operating expenses, $1,900, around $2,000 a month is the normal operating expense, it seems. And on top of that, once a year, the insurance cost or any other big expenses. So it leaves me with an operating profit in January of more than $8,000. February is a bit slow. 3 bookings, but 23 days rented. So that was actually one of the things. My villa manager has a large number of villas, and when there's an issue with one of the villas, so let's say the pool is leaking or there's a bedroom flooded or whatever, no electricity, they have to reallocate the guests to a different villa. And sometimes you're on the suffering side when you don't get the revenue because you have some issue in your villa and the guests are transferred out. And sometimes you're on the receiving end, you have an empty month or something, and you get the guests from a different villa. Now the rates might be a bit lower than you would want because it's always an upgrade, so you get for the guests, it's always an upgrade. That means you get the lower rates from a villa that is slightly smaller typically. So nevertheless, this was a long booking, 15 days of these 23 days. And that resulted in a decent revenue of more than 7,000 and an operating profit of more than $5,000. Now, March was a very bad month. Only 2 bookings, only 7 days rented out. That barely covered the cost. There was another issue with the pool and it was blocked for 7 days. And I also spent 8 days myself there with a couple of friends. Now, that was also for me the very first time I spent time in the villa after it was completed, unfortunately. And it was quite stressful to smoothen out a lot of issues that were still around. So this was the first time I realized firsthand about all the construction issues that were still unsolved and all the little issues that were still there and need fine-tuning. So March was, with all that, pretty much flatline and a lost month in terms of profit. I can be happy that the expenses were covered. Operating expenses covered, but not depreciation, of course. Now, April was a lot better. 7 bookings and 27 days booked out. 1 day for some maintenance issue, and the average rate went up quite a bit. So that results in $10,000. Expenses went up as well, but still $7,500 operating profit for the month of April, which is considered a low season month, so that's quite good. And May, I also had 7 bookings, 23 days rented out, so that is okay-ish. Average rate was also okay-ish, and that results in $6,400 operating profit for the May. Now, June is a rather good month in theory for the guests especially. 8 bookings, 25 days, that's close to booked out. Another day for some maintenance issue. Selfuse, I was there 3 days myself. The way I do that is when I see it's empty, I wait until about 2 days before and then I block it and go in there myself. So I try not to waste any bookings, but if the villa is empty, then I go and enjoy it myself. So these 3 days of self-use should not really prevent me from getting any bookings because I do it very spontaneously. Now the rates in June is a bit of a shoulder season, not so good rates. July, August would then be high season. Nevertheless, still a good occupancy and resulting in more than $6,000 operating profit. Now, July rates are very high in the high season. That unfortunately also resulted in not a good occupancy rate. Maybe the rates were simply too high in this case. So only 20 days booked, and 1 day I used it myself. So average rate $420, 6,000. So for the operating profit. So even though it's peak season or high season, actually, the profit was not really that impressive. And August was a bit of a disaster, actually. So booking wise, I was struggling anyway. Nevertheless, I had a couple good bookings, but these had to be cancelled because the roof was leaking, the flat roof for the living room. And I had to take the villa off the market for about 15 days. That's really a disaster in the high season. 15 days off the market, only 10 days rented out, and 5 days because I had no bookings, I went in there myself. You see the average rate in this season is really good, but if you don't have many booking days, then there's no point in that either. So $5,000 revenue, $2,400 operating profit. Very disappointing for an August. September seems to be the favorite of the guests. 7 bookings, 26 days, so a very good occupancy, but the rates are very low. So September is no longer high season. Rates are low. People love to stay there for a week or so in the low rates, and it's very nice still. The weather is great. So 1 day I went in there myself, $7,500 revenue and about $3,800 operating profit. That's because another payment for the insurance was necessary, and that is a big expense in September. And October, now here we close out the year, 3 bookings, 11 days, and these 11 days are only in the first half of the month. Nothing blocked now on maintenance, and I went in there 2 days myself. Still okay average rate. So 3,300 operating profit because I count only half of the expenses. Now let's sum it up on the total year. So I had 72 bookings. That doesn't mean much at all. 247 nights I had booked out, rented out, and that means 68% occupancy rate over the entire year. So that is slightly below expectations. I would hope for at least 70%, or everything above that is better. Now I had 27 days blocked for various repairs and maintenance, mostly construction issues that had to be resolved. So that of course is close to a month, and that is way worse than I would have thought it would be. And on the other hand, that means I hope next year will be better as far as that is concerned. But 27 days off, including 2 weeks in high season, that was expensive, that was bad, and it can only get better. Selfuse, 20 nights, that is pretty good, especially because it did not really cost me much. I tried to balance it in low season and made sure that there is no booking already, or it's unlikely that I will get a booking. So 20 nights I stayed there myself, and that was one of the benefits. It's nice to stay there, but it's also work, quality assurance, coordination of issues that need to be fixed, but still a nice vacation to be there. So the revenue of the whole year was close to $90,000 and operating profit close to $60,000. Now, if I deduct the depreciation, and after all it's a leasehold, that means I have to write it off over the remaining 27 years that I own that place. So with that I have slightly more than $40,000. So the $59,000 is free cash flow, but around $40,000 is profit after depreciation. I still have to pay taxes on that, but these are 40,000, and if I divide that on the capital that I've put in, the expense of building and owning that place, that comes to around 8% annualized. Now again, if I would not have done as much maintenance or repairs these 27 days, that would probably be 9%. Still, 8% is not too bad for a place where you can occasionally stay yourself. Plus there's upside potential for the coming years. So 8%, when I started this journey, the average rate on a savings account was roughly 0%. Now you can get close to 5% on a US dollar account. So the benchmark has moved a bit. Nevertheless, I think 8% with the potential for an increase in the coming years is not too bad. So that is really the performance, the profitability of the first year of my villa. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the second year will be better. I already have some bookings for the second year, so I did not start with a clean, empty calendar. That is one improvement. Also, let's see how the inflation drives the prices, how the market evolves. There are, of course, more villas coming on the market, but tourism is coming back or not. Maybe there are some catch-up effects after COVID in the first year as well that were beneficial. We will see, time will tell. But the first year is now in the books and I'm at 8% on my capital. If you also have a property, a rental property in Bali or somewhere else in the region, and you would like to share the profitability for others to learn, is it a good investment or not? What can we expect? Please drop me an email and we make a video on that one. So thank you very much for watching and see you in the next one.